Welcome everyone. All of the people in chat, the early gang. Thank you guys for coming along, you little cuties. Anyway, so if you are here, hopefully you will know a little bit about DID. If you don't, I will give you like a little brief background. So DID, me and Miri is the one on the bottom here. Me and Miri.
Hi-yo.
This one, we both have been professionally diagnosed with DID, dissociative identity disorder, which previously was known as multiple personality disorder. So it means we've got loads of freaking people in our heads. Sorry, I'm gonna make weird ass jokes during this because that's how I deal with everything. So dissociative identity disorder is basically when you're little, like a little person, and your brain is developing. If you have some kind of like abuse or trauma or something, then you basically will create like new personalities because your brain can't stick to one. I'm kind of just giving you like a rough overview because I don't want to go too much into it straight away, because I think a lot of answering these questions will like open it up more to you guys. But what we'll do is we'll jump straight in to the questions. And if you guys in the chat haven't sent in any questions and we say something and you have a question that like leads on from that, then please just go ahead and throw it in chat and whatever. Or if you've got one directed at me or at Miri, then just let us know and we'll answer it to our best abilities. We have got BeccaBoo here because Becca's obviously a very, very close friend to both of us, and she obviously has been thrown into the world of DID all of a sudden. Because she's now got two very close friends that have DID, and she's kind of been thrown into it so she can answer questions about what it's like to live like around someone that's got DID, what it was like finding out that her close friends had DID, everything like that. So I'm gonna jump right in with the first lot of questions. Now we have a lot, so I'm just kind of gonna make my way throughout the lists.
I'm ready. I'm so ready.
I go through that. It's kind of scary. Something else I will say is, oh my god, where is my DID section on my thing? Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it on my phone. Something else I will say is every person with DID has kind of different experiences. So something that I might experience with my DID is something that Miri won't, or she will, or they will experience in like a different way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Right, I'm gonna hop right in with the first question. Sorry, I had a bit of fluff on my lip. And also, is the music too loud? I feel like it's too loud in my headphones. I'm gonna turn it down just a tiny bit. That feels a bit better. Now I feel like I'm not like shouting at you guys. Okay, so the first one that we had is it hard to keep track of who's who? Like, do any of them have similar characteristics or ways that they are? So, Miri, do you want to go first on this one?
It's kind of confusing sometimes. I think that at times when you're dissociating, so when you're not sure exactly who's around, so like sometimes for us, one of our triggers for that is looking in a mirror. I might sort of not know who I am and be like, who is this person? So that could be a bit confusing, but some of them are similar, but usually I can identify who's who, but it can get confusing when there's a lot of alters around. Is that similar to you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I have like nearly triple the amount of alters that Miri does. Yeah. And so for me, I'm better at it now because I've known about my girls for a lot longer. But for me, it's a lot of, because I have 25 alters, including myself, 25 personalities. For me, there are a couple that have like similar ways of saying or doing something, and until they, speak properly or do something out of the ordinary, it's hard to like differentiate between them. Again, I have quite a lot of littles in my system, so sometimes like all kids kind of act the same, don't they, at a certain age? So sometimes it's hard to differentiate between like, is this like this one, or is it this one, because they all want to do the same sort of things. So it can be difficult, but we have in our system become quite good at recognizing which one is which, just because we've known about them for so long. We've got used to, like, we've learned about them over a good few years now. The bird 25, holy hell, I know I am one trauma biatch, but yeah, so a fun fact on that is I had 26 and then I had one integrate, so we are on the path of, like, integrating. If you don't know what that means. Going up. Yeah.
I've had a new one recently.
Yeah, but it can go up and down.
Like you said, with time, it definitely helps. So at the very beginning, so again, with this new alter, it can be a bit confusing, like which one is it? But then you realise it's actually none of the ones that previously exist. Actually, it's a new one. That can be a bit, like, mind-boggling, but yeah.
Definitely, 100%.
We've gone up to 10. We're at 10 at the moment.
So yeah, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and it depends on how long you've been not living with the ID, because you obviously live with it since you're a baby, but how long you've known about it and, like, come to terms with it and agreed to, like, learn about them, rather than, like, trying to cut them off and pretend they're not there. Because a lot of people do that and are, like, in doubt, or what's the word? In Denial, there we go. Or in denial. So as soon as you start learning about them, you start to realise, like, actually, this alter does this slightly different, so it's definitely this one. I don't know about anyone else's alters, but mine like to play tricks on me, and they like trying to force me to, like, know who it is coexisting or who's been out. They're like, come on, we've left you a clue. So everyone's different, but yeah, so that's kind of it for me. This one is kind of following on from the point I just made about mine being cheeky, because we've got, do they all listen to you and do as you say? If you want some peace and quiet, will they listen and be quiet? So for me, personally, battling with my alters, trying to get some peace and quiet and whatever, can be a challenge. It's mainly if they don't think that I actually need the space. I'm just having a bit of a moody day or whatever. But again, I try and work really closely with all of my girls to make sure that everyone's happy and everyone's got what they need. So for me, if I genuinely was, like, really stressed out and I needed them to be quiet for a while, I didn't want them to front or whatever, they would genuinely, like, listen. But if I was just being silly and just was, like, throwing a tantrum or whatever, they probably would be like, nah, not about that life. So what about you, Miri?
I was just going to say, also, everybody in Steph's system is female, whereas I have 2 guys and 1 non-binary. Just throwing that out there for if it comes up. Yeah, I think, again, because I've worked with, like, everybody in my system for a number of years now, even before I got the diagnosis, I knew that they were there. So I've tried to kind of, like, make friends with them, and, you know, if to, like, maintain my life, it means they need to just sort of, like, take a step back in certain times, then they're happy to do that, because then it's like give and take. So if they make things easier for me, then I make things easier for them as well, and we just try to work together to make everybody as happy as possible. So I'm really lucky that they all just, like, try and are very peaceful and get along and everything. But I think other people, like we said, other people with DID can really struggle with that, especially if they have amnesia, because then you don't know what they've done, and it can be a lot, if there's not that communication there, it can be a lot harder to have everybody work towards a common goal. But over time, I think it gets better.
Definitely. I think we answered that pretty good. It's kind of hard to explain. I think it's hard to explain when this is something you live with every day and everything's so, like, this is, like, your normal. And when someone asks you these questions, you're like, oh damn, does everyone not deal with this, you know? So yeah, it's quite interesting. This next one, I'm gonna spin it round before we answer it as me and Miri, because I want to get Becca's opinion on this, if that's okay. So the actual question, I'm gonna adapt it slightly. But Becca, what's the hardest thing, do you think, about living so closely, as in like being really like close with someone that has DID? Like, what do you think the hardest part of that is?
For me personally, it's more messing up who I'm talking to. It's who I'm talking to. So it's like if I'm talking to like you, Steph, like everything's fine. Or it's like the very first time I ever met you, Hannah was presenting. So everyone was talking about Steph, but Hannah was there, and I was like, "Who the hell's Hannah? Like, where's this Steph?"
Yeah.
And it took a hot minute. So it's like recognizing and knowing who's actually fronting. Especially if you're brand new to the person, because obviously you don't know the individual mannerisms of each and every personality. That's the hardest part, I think, for me anyways.
Yeah, I think definitely it's, like you said, the first time you ever met me was when it wasn't me and it was Hannah presenting.
Yeah.
And obviously Hannah, for me, Hannah has a very, very northern accent. She's very much a doesn't take shit from anyone kind of girl, like nothing like me. I'm such a fucking pushover. So she would have been very different, but because you hadn't even met me yet, that would have been like your first like, oh, this is Steph, until you realised that it wasn't. But I completely get that. I think that's got to be really difficult for people that you're close to, unless you have been around them for a very, very long time, and met each of the personalities. I think it can be really difficult to know who you're talking to. So that's good to know though, because I think then it gives me and Miri like a good chance to make sure that our others, I'm not going to say our girls because that's what mine are, that our others, our alters, know that when they're around you, if they are going to present or something, they tell you like it's this person and I'm presenting kind of thing. I think that's good. Good thing to know.
I think it's quite sort of, I can imagine it being quite stressful that you put that on yourself, like, oh God, I need to know. But I guess advice from that would be, if you get it wrong, I think most of the time, as long as you're really trying, that's appreciated still.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was worth inputting there, but I think that you put a lot of stress on yourself to try and, care for those you love. And if they're multiple, you want to show that to all of them. But everybody makes mistakes, and I forget people's names all the goddamn time. So people, if there's like 25 names to remember, like I think most people in Steph's system appreciate that I could probably get names wrong.
I think the only thing that you would have to worry about, Becca, is Hannah, because Hannah is obsessed with you. I think if she fronted and you started saying like, oh, who is it? She'd be like, bitch, who do you think you are?
No, true.
But apart from
And again,
that,
I think with I was just gonna say, I think with time as well, like if you've known somebody for ages, like it will
get easier,
more
won't
natural.
it? Yeah.
And I think there's also some alters that front more than others, so
100%.
you get to know them more than others.
100%. It's got to be hard to handle the stress of it. You guys are amazing. You're amazing, Luke. You are amazing. Look at Luke out here cheering us on.
I know, right?
Have you ever had it where someone likes most but not all of your identities? Yes, 100%. A couple of mine can be very difficult, and I say that in the kindest way. I hope they won't be upset with me. Because when you look at it, DID, this is a trigger warning here, but obviously DID is from a lot of trauma and abuse, and the way that DID is formed is you create these personalities to take that for you, like take the brunt of it so that you don't have to. So for me personally, something as simple as like me going through cancer at like 14, 15 years old, that is like a very traumatic thing to go through surgeries and the cancer treatment and everything. So for me, I had created personalities to do it for me because I wasn't, like, in my head I hadn't developed a way to cope with stress. Instead, I coped with it by creating someone else to go and deal with it for me. So sometimes those personalities can become a bit more difficult in the sense of they've had a lot of trauma. So sometimes if you bring something up or whatever, you've created them in a way that's like they've had to deal with that certain period of life. So they have become like a badass or almost like disconnected from emotion. So for me personally, a couple of my alters can really clash with others, because others don't necessarily understand, like, oh damn, they're this way because like of what's happened to them. So definitely 100% I've had some people clash with them, but in that sense they almost just like work with them to build a better friendship and relationship and become more civil, and even if they don't like each other, they're like, you know, that's it. I mean, one of my old friends used to clash with one of my girls so bad they could not be in the same room. So it would be like if that girl fronted, they would take themselves out of the room and away from that person, kind of thing. I don't know if it's been the same for you, Miri, because I don't know if any of yours are even like a bit more difficult, because they're all lovely.
I think, again, because I've only got, about 9 that are more 8 that are more active. It's just a lot less for me, and I think a lot of them are sort of more like gentler in a way, that they just like want to like make people happy. They're like people pleasers. I think there's only, Lucy, she's very strong-minded and strong-willed, so I think if I am struggling with something, she finds it a lot easier to be like, no, this is what we have to do, and put your foot down. But I don't think she's been sort of that way enough, or I've not really introduced a lot of my alters to many people, so I haven't really had many people have an issue with them. They don't like to front around people very often unless they really trust them. So basically I've just had less experience than you, because I have less alters, and 2, I haven't shared them very much for much of my life, so I'm lucky in that regard.
That's great. This is really educational. That's all I know about DID is on the film Split. Split I refuse to watch, and so will my girls, because we've seen a few like snippets and like trailers, and it is nothing like DID. The point of that is that was more focused on the fact of DID, but it was the fact that they were a psychopath. Not everyone with DID is a psychopath.
I've got something to put in here.
You go ahead. I hate the Split.
I have watched it. And if you were saying that this was just, if you took away all the mental disorderness from it, and it's just hard to do that, because I found at the beginning of the film, it wasn't accurate, but I think that in some ways the beginning of the film could be used to help people understand, like as a tool to understand, look, this person's female one day, like this person's female, but they're also this person who's male, this person's like younger. That could be used in a useful way to show people that one physical body could be lots of different people. However, it then had most of the main alters that came out be very, like you said, psychopathic, controlling, manipulative, and DID as a disorder is not that way. It's much more of an internal disorder. The most harm that DID will cause is to the person with DID, not the outside world. It's much more internal than that. It's not like we're going to go out and do things like that. And it's a bad portrayal that we don't need. There's enough stigma against DID, multiple personalities and all of that. And then towards the end it just goes crazy and it turns into like a sci-fi superhero, like it's a monster. And we really don't need to be portrayed as monsters. No. Like I said, it's an internal thing. Most DID people will end up suffering with depression or anxiety and things like that because it is so internal. It's a trauma-based disorder. It's not going to be, oh, let's go out and kidnap a woman. Like,
I think that's important.
It would be so, though, like not common for that to be the case. I'm sure that people with DID could have psychopathic tendencies. One of their alters could, but again, even if they're a psychopath, that doesn't mean that they're going to be a horrible person.
I think it's important to remember that a lot of alters won't go out and do anything and a lot of the people that you know, a lot of people with DID you won't even know they have DID because you wouldn't be able to tell until they came out and said like, oh yeah, I have DID, my alters might want to meet you at some point. But a lot of people with DID, you would never even be able to tell that they have it. And I think that's important to remember.
Other alters are uncomfortable as well. I mean, I know for a lot of my girls, like Pepper and Lucy, if they go out and somebody says, oh, hi, Emily, it actually upsets them. So they wouldn't do anything like that or confused with me. So it's not a great representation. At the beginning, it could be used as an educational tool, but it's just wrong in so many ways.
100%. Yeah, it's so fucked. We watched it before the diagnosis, and holy shit, definitely. I do not want to watch it. I don't want to like subject my girls to that either. So, Dingia said, "Stop me if this is inappropriate. How does it work with relationships? Say if you're in a relationship, do your alters still identify as being single or part of the same relationship?" This is a great question, and this is probably a really difficult one to talk about within like a couple of minutes. It changes for every person. I know for a fact I'm different to Miri. So with me and my girls, we very much, the girls are all single. They may find crushes. I know that a lot of them have crushes on real life people in the real world. I shouldn't say real world, but I don't know what to call it. In the physical world. Even now, after years, I still can never find the right terminology, so excuse me. But they might form like real crushes on physical humans. But for our system, personally, we had agreed that they would not form relationships, but that I, as the host, could. So obviously, I'm going to be getting married to Connor, and I have my relationship with him as the host. But my girls won't pursue relationships, because for us, if I allowed one of them to, sorry, my voice is going a bit weird, if I allowed, like, say, Hannah to form a relationship with someone, then I'd have to let all of them form one. And now 25 relationships with 25 different people is not going to be fun in the slightest. So for us personally, because of the size of our system, we decided that we would allow Steph, me, the host, to form a relationship and live out that relationship, but that they could have crushes and whatever, but they wouldn't pursue anything, just purely to keep everything a bit more simple for everyone involved, really. But Miri, do you want to talk about yours at all? You don't have to. You absolutely don't
no,
have
I'm happy to. I've talked about it like openly on my YouTube before, so ours is a bit more complicated. There's only like 9 active alters, and as much so there's, even with 9, it would still be difficult for each of them. Some of them aren't old enough to anyway, but again, not everybody is able to have a relationship again because it's just too many. But I'm lucky that only like 3 of them, I have to like constantly keep count of like what's going on. 3 of them have like interests in people, because even before I got a diagnosis, before everything, I personally am polyamorous. I've like played with the idea of relationships and stuff. So this is again very personal to me. I'm not single. I'm with Luke. I'm engaged to marry Luke. Me as a single person. I was like, I know what I'm trying to say here. Me as a single person, Emily. I'm with Luke. But I do also have an alter called Pepper, who is in a relationship with our housemate called Nick. So for me, because me and Luke have been together for like 7 years, it took time and we talked about it a lot, but he's comfortable with one of my alters being in a relationship with one other person. I think if we added any more people into that, it might get confusing. But then also I have another alter who is dating Luke as well. So I think I've experienced other system where they have multiple of their alters dating the same person. So like multiple alters dating the one person that you're with. So it's like one partner per system. But I'm fortunate enough that, we're all able to keep comfortable and happy and have 2 partners per system. But I think, again, like with Steph, if many more of my alters were like, I want a partner too, we'd have to be like, okay, we need to draw the line somewhere. It's a tricky balance, and I think it depends on the system. You have to all have a dialogue and conversation, and that's my
yeah.
that's
100%.
my system.
It's a very difficult situation, but like I said, everybody with DID is different. And again, I think it depends on the size of your system and if the host is interested in like settling down. Because if I hadn't have met Connor, and I was kind of just going out and just seeing loads of people, whatever, like meeting loads of people, I think it would be, you know, really okay to like allow the different alters to go and like spend time with people and meet people and form relationships. But for myself, because I wanted to settle down, that's, you know, what happened, and my girls had to stop with that.
It's not like forced on our alters. It's not like we're like, right, that's it, this is how it is. Like, I mean, that's not the same for me. It is a discussion, and most of my alters do understand that that's kind of how it is. We're part of a system. We need to make this one life function. I don't know if that's the same for you. It's not just a controlling, like, you're not allowed to. It's a
lot of communication and understanding between you guys. Anyway, so I'm going to move on to the next question. Goodness, we have so many. How did you know, or what did it feel like to find out you had DID pre and post diagnosis? For me, this was a really difficult time during my diagnosis because in the beginning, it kind of all came out at once. I'd always known something wasn't quite right, and I had gaps in my memory. There were times where I wasn't acting like myself, or people would say, you've done and said this, and I don't remember it. But for me, I completely, like, went off the rails. I was, like, drinking every night. I was, like, coming out with all these, like, weird things and sayings that weren't like me, and I didn't remember any of it. And yeah, so for me, pre-diagnosis, I kind of got to a point where it was really bad. We had like psychiatrists coming out to the house trying to figure out what was wrong with me, all sorts. And then we went to a specialist and got our diagnosis. And after, it was like such a relief, but also you have this fear that it's not right and it's not the right diagnosis and maybe something's wrong still. And that's completely natural with like any diagnosis, especially with DID. Oh, bless you, Dingy, you really should stream, I'm sorry. But for me personally, it was like such a relief, but also just a really scary time to think like, oh God, I have 20-something personalities that I need to learn about. And I was like, what's everyone around me gonna think? Like, I'm never gonna get like in a relationship, nobody's gonna understand it. So for me personally, I was just really, really scared at the start, I guess, until I'd kind of learnt more about the alters. I'd watched like Multiplicity in Me with Jess, she's amazing. And yeah, I just really did my research, figured out how to communicate with the alters and figure out a way that we could like live in harmony kind of thing. I don't know about you, Miri?
Mine's a bit different, and I wasn't sure if it was DID for the longest time, so I kind of didn't experience DID the typical way. Like when I was about 16 or so, I thought like I was doing Ouija board and ghosts and spirits and things, and I thought that what these voices were in my head were ghosts. And I was like, oh, right, you know what you do with ghosts? You try and get them as happy as possible so that they're able to move on. So from day one, as soon as I heard and experienced the first alter, I thought they were spirits, and I was immediately trying to have that open communication. So I've, like, since a very young age, been talking and communicating and letting them have their time out with them. So over time I was like, well, okay, I don't think it is spirits anymore, I don't know what it is. So it was never like scary for me because it just felt so natural and at home in my head. But then when I did some research, because I was like, well, it's not spirits, I need to know what it is, because it's not, I don't believe it to be schizophrenia. I just don't want to know. So I did some research, I heard about DID, watched some videos on it, and I thought that I didn't actually identify with that because there's certain traits about DID that I was like, I don't have that. But then I went to a specialist in dissociative disorders because I was like, I think it's a dissociative disorder, I don't know if it's DID or not. But then I went through that diagnosis and they were like, yep, it's DID. So that's all I have. And I still question sometimes. I'm like, is it DID? But no, when I went through the results with the woman that did it with me, she explained to me why and how and things like that. So that's my 2 cents. Like afterwards, after I got the diagnosis, it's been kind of a relief, but kind of also I still don't 100% I'm like, is that really true? So there's still a lot of that, but I think that's anxiety brought in as well. But it's nice to be able to comfortably share with people, I have DID, so these are my alters if you'd like to meet them. That feels really nice to my alters. I think it helped my alters more than it helped me, if that makes sense.
That's lovely. I'm fascinated by all this. Hope all alters are doing good. Also tell them I said hi if you can. That's so sweet, Dingy. You are the kind of person that we like. Absolutely, 100%. You little sweetie. Okay, Brill. Let's move on to the next one. So, do you get some of the alters' way of expressing themselves, like talking or doing stuff from a few people around you or that you know? Now, this is a really interesting one because DID, when you are like forming alters when you're younger or when you're older, you usually do it subconsciously, but you take inspiration from those around you. So you could base it on someone that is around you, or you could base it on like a famous person. It's what is like at that age that you're in, it's what makes you feel safe. It could be there are people that have alters, not myself personally, but there are some people that have alters that are like teddy bears or mermaids. I do have a mermaid actually, or at least I don't know yet whether she is a mermaid or she thinks that she is and she like acts like one. But they are based on like what makes you feel safe at the time that you are going through something, and you do it subconsciously. So sometimes it's when I meet an alter and I like get to know them, I'm like, actually, wait a minute, you're like this person, or you remind me a lot of like this famous person. Like there's one of my girls who doesn't act like her, but she almost looks like Hannah Montana. And I think that I obviously made her during a time where I like watched Hannah Montana, and I think that's when I was going through cancer, because when I was in like radiation treatment, I was isolated and in a room, and they had like the whole Hannah Montana series, and I just like watched them because I was young and there was nothing to do. So it's very much like you create alters based on like what's around you and what feels safe. But it doesn't always have to be. You can make them up as like what you wish you were like at that time. Again, it's about feeling safe. It's about getting the alter to take the brunt of like the trauma or the abuse or whatever. So you kind of do what you want to be. If you wanted to be somewhere else in the world, you could create an alter that's like a rock in Spain, because you feel like, if I'm a rock in Spain, then I can't be dealing with this right now, kind of thing, you know? There is literally no limit to it. So absolutely, you can create them based on like what's going on in your life. And like I said, personally, there are a few people in my life that when I was younger seemed like so brave and strong, and clearly subconsciously I created some alters based on them. And I've done it with like people that are famous as well. So it's very dependent on like what's going on around you at the time, and what makes you feel safe and everything. But yeah, I don't know if that's the same for you, Miri, or whether you feel differently.
I don't think I could identify that any of my alters are like copying some, like trying to be somebody, if that makes sense. I'm certain they are, and I know a lot of them take out like aspects. We're kind of similar in a lot of ways, that we're sort of, not that we take aspects from each other, but I know that some of them, like, we're quite similar in personality. Yeah, I don't think many of mine are from anybody I know or anything I know, but I know that, for example, Lucy sometimes thinks that, like feels like she would be a witch or a vampire. So again, like, these sort of fantasy kind of things can very well be a real person in a DID system, because it's about, like what you said, about what you feel comfortable as. But it's not exactly, you know, it's not a conscious choice to create them like this person. It's just a natural, like, as you're developing and growing your own personality, you grow your other personalities, and your other personalities grow into these either a stereotype or a fancy creature or whatever they choose to be. But I think it is more common for them to just be people.
Yeah, 100%.
But it is possible.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to the next one. Some of these have been like almost like doubled up, so I'm gonna kind of skip the ones that are the same that we've already talked about and just move on to the ones that we haven't. This one is kind of aimed at me, but I'll aim it at you as well, Miri. So this one says, are your alters okay being referred to as the girls, or is there something else they would rather go by? So for me personally, when my DID was like first diagnosed and we had like a name for them as like DID, the diagnosis, we kind of asked, like, is it all female? Is there like, are there any like creatures, animals, like objects, like what is it? Are there any males? They're like, no, we're just all girls. And I said, what would you like to be called? Like, would you like a name for like all of you, or like what would you like? And they were like, well, we kind of are just happy to be acknowledged for once, like rather than you not knowing that we're here. So we'd love to be just called like the girls or something, like as long as you're acknowledging us as one and like acknowledging the fact that we are there and we exist, we'll be happy. So we kind of came up with the name the girls, like that's what they said, we'd just be happy if you called us the girls, and it's kind of stuck ever since. Now it's just Steph and the girls, and that's what everyone knows us as. I mean, my family call us like Steph and Co, like that's just something that we call, they just say how are the girls. And that's kind of something they liked. They didn't really want like a name that they couldn't connect to anything. So obviously it's great that you guys had Myriad as your whole system name, but for us, we felt like we kept thinking of a name and we kept thinking like, oh, should we be called this or this? And we just couldn't connect with it enough, and we didn't feel any like emotion with it. But we just loved Steph and the girls, or the girls. So for us personally, that's what we like to be called. They don't mind if, you know, they say Steph or she or whatever, because they recognise that I'm the host. I try to say like we and us as much as possible, unless, you know, no one's coexisting with me or whatever, then I say I. But for the majority of the time, for the most part, they do just really enjoy being called the girls because they're being acknowledged for once. So what about you, Miri?
Yeah, ours is slightly different. For, again, the longest time, I was the only one that me and Luke were the only ones that acknowledged that they existed. And then when we got the diagnosis, and we did want to share more with people. I think I asked you this at the start. I was like, do they mind being and the girls? Because my system, if we were just like, oh, it's Emily and them, they'd be like, oh, we're just add-ons, we're just extras. And they found that to be almost insulting. They didn't want to be Emily and others, because then they didn't feel like they had their own autonomy and they were their own individuals. So when I was creating my YouTube channel, which is something I had thought about for absolutely bloody years, the things that I'd wanted to talk about on my channel were so like diverse and random that I was like, oh, I think myriad, it's a myriad of different possibilities and things. And then that kind of just stuck, that it was just everybody in the system, because again, some of mine are male, so I've got a non-binary, I've got a gender fluid, so they're happy to just be myriad, especially again if we're co-conscious and it's like me and Lucy are here, then it's just like, let's call us Myriad, because that's like a team name. It's something that we can all kind of like vibe with and be comfortable with. So again, if say a friend doesn't know who's out, but they can see that it's maybe not just Emily, they can be like, oh, hey Myriad, how are you doing? Instead, so that there's no like worry. But that being said, when it is an individual, so when it is me, Emily, or if it is Pepper, they prefer to be called by their one name.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's already interesting to see how different and diverse it can be between us.
So different.
It's so crazy. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. This is like in 2 parts, and maybe Becca could chime into this one as well. I'm not sure.
Yep.
Dingy, it was the first spelling, the one MYRIAD. IAD. Yeah, so the next one is in two parts, so I'll do the first one first. How should we react if an alter comes and speaks to us? So, I don't know, Becca, if you are able to give any tips or whatever. Your camera's going a little bit out of sync again. But if you're able to give any, like, tips or, like, anything as to how you felt the first time when either Hannah was presenting or one of my girls was presenting or one of Myriad was presenting, and how you dealt with it.
I think the thing that helped me a lot was you two spoke about your alters a lot.
Sorry.
So I got to learn them before I met them. So, for example, like say when I met Hannah at first, I knew nothing about you, I knew nothing about Hannah, I knew nothing about anything. But after I got to speak to you, it was more of a case of, oh, so-and-so's now presenting, like they're saying, oh, we're fronting. And I'm like, oh, hey, how you doing? And so forth. And then like with Miri, like if Renz comes out, for example, I'm like, hey, you doing, dude? Like, how you going? Like, because you've spoken about them so much, it's like, I know, I just treat it as, I mean, obviously it's a separate person, so it's like as if I'm talking to a completely new person. You know, okay, yes, I might be looking at the same system, but I'm talking to a completely new person. And that's the thing a lot of people struggle to get their head around, that they are individual people. So I was lucky in the sense that you taught me about them before I met them. And then when I did meet them, it was like not as scary. I just had to remember certain bits and pieces. But yeah, no, it's not. I think, yeah, it's the biggest tip. If you meet someone with DID, ask them. Literally just ask them about the other personalities. Because then, or other alters, sorry, and then you'll find it a hell of a lot easier.
100%, yeah. Okay, well, I'm trying to... So, for me and the girls, they most likely aren't going to front one-on-one with someone that they aren't that comfortable with, haven't spent that much time with. They might come out on stream. We're talking about the possibility of like maybe some of the girls coming out and taking over the stream for like every now and then, because they all have different things they like to do, whether it'll be like one of them likes to play Minecraft or one of them likes to play Apex or something like that. And to be honest, a lot of the girls are a hell of a lot better at the game than I am. So for me personally, us personally, if they were to actually find comfort in you enough to like come out and present in front of you, you've got to remember that's a heck of a lot of like a courage that they've done to do that, and just, you know, speak to them, get to know them, like see if they're okay. Like that's the biggest thing, is making sure that they're okay. A lot of the time people know that with the ID alters front because the host is stressed or they're under a lot of pressure or they're not coping in some way, and that's why they've stepped forward. There are other times, don't get me wrong, that alters like to come out. I mean, just like you would want to if you were trapped inside all day, you'd want to come out. So the main thing is just making sure they're okay, having a chat with them, seeing how they are, and just forming like a proper friendship and relationship with them. Because obviously they are people too, and, you know, just talk to them how you would us, you know, and make sure you're being genuine, if that makes sense.
I think the thing that resonated with us the most is when Becca was just like, just treat them as different people. Like, so I'm very different from, we're using pronouns. We're very different from Steph and Co, in that when I'm Emily, when I'm very stressed, I find it hard to find my alters. They kind of are further away, so actually they're more active when we're all just chill and able to like relax. So if people meet my alters, it's just treat them as if they're a new person. Just if they are using their names, something for us that my alters really appreciate is if you make it can be really difficult, and I 100% appreciate that, especially when we're gaming and we have a name and it's like, God, which one do we use? But using their names means so much to them when it's like, Pepper, how are you doing, Pepper? Then she's like, oh my God, you're talking to me and not just Emily. So that for us is like a massive, massive thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think making sure that you're making the conscious effort to validate them, make sure that you know that they know that you know who they are, you know. So if like one of my girls comes out and someone's like, oh hi Hannah or whatever, it makes them, I mean Hannah's not gonna react in a very like hi kind of way, she just breaks up, but a lot of the girls, like I think with DID you're hidden for so long and you feel like you have to be hidden, and you can even like pretend to be the host kind of thing. So when somebody actually talks to you like you're a proper human, you're like, oh my God, like they're actually talking to me and not just Steph, you know. So I think that's very, very important, like Miri said, is making sure you validate them enough by like talking to them directly and using their name and like remembering little things about them. I know with me it's very difficult because I've got to remember like enough information about 25 individuals, but even if you just get along with a couple of them, or a couple have fronted in front of you, and just remembering, you know, oh, I know that Hannah likes this, or B likes that, or Lux is like this, and like I know that she likes playing this game, so why don't we play this with them? Like I think that means the world to them, and that is like a positive trigger for them. So the more they know that you're accepting of them and kind to them, that's a positive trigger to get them to come out more, which is kind of what you want with DID. You want them to come out for positive things, not just for like stress-related things, which is what happens with me when I'm stressed or when I'm sick or whatever. A lot of my girls do come out and coexist or fully front, and I take a nap, that's what we call it. So yeah, it's just finding out the different things about them and really like making that conscious effort with them to like remember things about them as you would with anybody else. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much it on that one.
I just want to quickly say, it's not, you know, nobody's going to be like, I mean, when Pepper was out and, you know, if somebody gets her name wrong, it slightly hurts, but she, like most of in my system do understand. It's not always easy to remember, or, you know, if you meet one of the alters for the first time, you know, you're meeting a new person, so that can be slightly like daunting, or like, how do I act, you know, especially as physically we look the same. So I know that it can be a little bit weird, but if you just try and get in your mind that although physically they're the same, it is a different person, that can maybe help as a tool to just keep remembering they're a different person and learning them as an individual rather than as, like, say, Emily, like learning them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it takes time, and you're not going to get it straight away, and it's all good. Like, I still get Steph's alters confused in places, so nobody's going to jump down your throat and be like, you're wrong. It just chill with it, treat them as different people, and you're good.
100%. It's a learning curve. I mean, I've been living with this for years. Miri's been living with it for years, and we still mess up all the time. Nobody's perfect. There's times where I think that one of the girls is coexisting and it's not, it's another one, and I'm like, oh, sorry. And I mean, they all have different ages, different like likes and dislikes, and it's hard to remember. I mean, I can, on top of like all your friends and family, you've got to then remember another 25 or whatever, and you've got to remember, oh, what do they like, what don't they like, things like that. I mean, Sierra has her tea different to me. Some of them don't drink coffee, some of them like this food, some of them don't like that food. And it's really hard to remember, but it's just a learning curve, and they're not going to jump down your throat if you don't remember it. It's not like that. They're very understanding, so yeah. This leads in quite nicely because I feel like we use a lot of terminology that a lot of people that don't have DID may not understand. So this is a really good one that was sent in. And it's what's some basic terminology that will be useful in understanding DID. So Becca, do you know any of the words that we use that you're like, either I don't even know what you mean when you say that, or where you're like, oh, I know that this means that?
Well, fronting is like who's presenting. I'm trying to think of like other words you use. I think I'm been around it for so much now, like I don't even think about it.
I know, yeah.
Existing two at the same time. What other things do you say?
It is hard when you're around it constantly. I know that sometimes I say it and people are like, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh, sorry, it means this. So yeah, fronting is basically who's presenting. So right now it's Steph. I am coexisting, which I'll understand in a minute. I'll
sorry
talk
if I
about
interrupt again as well. Sorry. Also, it depends on the individual system, but sometimes I say who's out.
Yeah. Who's out at the
it
moment.
Depends. But fronting, who's out.
So fronting, presenting, who's out, everything like that means like who is in front of you, like which personality, which person is in front of you.
I just been there. Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you talking to? Who is like gaming with you? Who's talking to you? Whatever. It basically just means who is it, you know. So that's one kind of terminology that we use. And like Miri says, we use our own like adapted words on it. What else did you say? You said coexisting. There's quite a few that you say with this. So you could say coexisting, co-fronting. I usually say who's with me. That's kind of a co-conscious. There's so many words in that one little section. But that just basically means if they're not fully presenting. So at the moment I'm co-conscious, at the moment coexisting. I use with me and coexisting the most for our system. That basically just means that some of my girls might be there like with me, but not fully fronting. You would be able to tell if they were fully fronting because everything about me would change. But coexisting or whoever's with you basically just means like they're with you, they're there if they need to take over, they're there just giving their little ideas every now and then. And sometimes when I'm coexisting, you can hear like their accent coming through. I think a lot of people have said that about me, is they can sometimes see like when Lux or when Hannah's coexisting. Lux is a very, very like Londoner, very much a Londoner, bloody hell, Gordon Bennett, that kind of girl. And her accent can come through quite strong, and so can Hannah's. So usually you can hear like a little bit of it. Yeah, so coexisting, that's kind of like what that is. So yeah, there's like coexisting, which is that obviously. Switching is really good. Marie, do you want to take that one away?
Just who, like, if you're saying I'm going to switch, you're going to get another alter out to be front, to be present. If you're switchy, so I don't know if you get this, Steph, but sometimes I get switchy, where it's like somebody's co-conscious with me, but they keep taking control, and then I keep taking control, and we're a bit backwards and forwards. That's being a bit, to us, that's being a bit switchy. But yeah, switching is when somebody's out and then somebody else comes out. I don't know any other, off the top of my head, any other terms.
I have got a couple more. But, yeah, I'm trying to think of the other terminology that we use on like a daily basis. So fronting, switching, coexisting.
Oh, you said it earlier, napping.
Oh yeah, so for us personally, fronting can take two different kind of routes. You can either be completely out of it, not knowing what's going on, or you can be like a front row driver, a front seat driver or whatever, that's like kind of like, no, not a front seat driver, a back seat driver that can see what's going on but can't actually control anything. So for me, when my girl's front, I go for like a little nap, which we call it, which just means basically I'm not there and they are. And it's usually they are taking control because I'm stressed or something. Hello, Papa. She doesn't want to leave now. She's like, Mummy. Oh, okay.
Dissociating as well, I've just remembered. Sometimes with this, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your alters, but you might start dissociating. You're just sort of, it's in a similar way, it's spacing out, where you just aren't fully conscious. You're just sort of, like, I've just best describe it as there's sort of like space. It's like as if you're making space for somebody to switch, to come forwards, but nobody is switching, so you're just sort of like zoning back.
And everyone dissociates. It's a form of like dissociation, but everybody does it. Like, you know, it's something as simple as like when you're driving and you drive the same route every day, and then you're kind of like driving along and then you realise you've been driving for like 10 minutes and you don't remember anything. That's a form of dissociation. It's basically just that, but on like a deeper, stronger level. Yeah, so I think that's like the main terminology that we use. I guess so. I can't think of anything else. Do you have any way to show what all of your alters look like, even if only simply?
Tried drawing ours.
It's very difficult, isn't it?
But each of my alters have a very vivid idea of what they look like, apart from my youngest, and that can make us feel, you know, say for example Felix, my male alter, comes out, he can feel quite uncomfortable because again he's a guy and he doesn't want to have a chest and things like that. But yeah, each of them do have a very clear idea of what they look like. I'm working on drawing all of my alters. Lucy draws herself sometimes, but yeah, I'm working on that. We've got pictures. We have like a Pinterest where we've like looked up pictures that are like similar to what they look like, but it's never the same as actually like expressing it in some way.
Yeah, I mean, some of my girls have got like little emoji things where they've like changed it to look like, you know, like on Snapchat, that Bitmoji thing, they've done like them to try and show similarities of what they look like, but it's kind of hard to know exactly what it's like to draw it exactly as to what they look like, if that makes sense, you know.
Try it in Sims sometimes, but again it's never quite right because you never like capture the personality in their eyes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. It's hard to do that.
How in depth do alters go? Like, do they have their own personalities? But they have their own personalities, but do they have hobbies, passions, interests, quirks?
Thank you, Josh, for the cheers. You little cutie. Thank you so much. That's a really good one. Oh, so alters are completely different people. They have their own brainwaves, blood patterns, like everything. So something that you're not allergic to, your alter could be. For me personally, my eyes change colour when different alters are fronting. We've had brainwave scans done by like actual doctors because I was having seizures, but not as myself, as one of my girls. And they could see the seizures, like the brainwave patterns on their scan, but not mine. So when they were fronting, they could see the different brain patterns and waves and everything from them, but not from me. So they completely change physically as well as personality-wise. So all of my girls are completely different. Like I said earlier, people like B and Hannah are very like strong-willed, independent, sassy women. Then you have some that are like really, really shy, don't really talk a lot, really, really sweet. Then you have those that are like, there's one that speaks French completely, like just only speaks French. You have ones that they can all be very, very different, but there are some that are very similar to myself. So it's still very dependent. Again, I have so many alters that there's bound to be differences between the majority of them. But there are a couple that are like very similar to me, and then the ones that are like the complete opposite of me. Mary?
Yeah, I think a lot of mine are, we all have similarities, but then we all have differences in different ways. It's all as if we're like siblings and you've been brought up the same way, but you still find ways to be different. And I know that, for example, we like drawing, but we like drawing in a different way, a couple of us. So Peter, like, he's quite young and he loves drawing, but he loves drawing in a very different way from the way I do. And he's, you know, very like decisive and like, this is what I want to do and it's gonna be fucking amazing. But I'm just like, oh, I keep doing it wrong, it's not like perfect and things like that. Whereas I've got another alter, Autumn, and she doesn't actually like video gaming, she doesn't like sitting down at a computer. She would rather, you know, be bustling around the house, like tidying, keeping it clean, or, you know, sitting and maybe watching a film with somebody, or going for walks. So I think a lot of, you know, because they are different people, they can like different things and enjoy different things. I know one of Steph's alters really loves cooking, you know, whereas others in her system don't particularly enjoy cooking. All kinds of things like that. You can have like some alters that are really amazing at one hobby or skill, and then others that aren't. In my system, we're all fairly like on the same level, but yeah, they can have different hobbies and enjoy different things and want to do different activities as well, especially depending on their age.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like some of my girls, even their, like you said, their hobbies can be so much more different as well. So I'm not artistic or creative in the slightest when it comes to like arts and crafts, but I know that a couple of my girls are like incredible at drawing and all of that. I can't bake to save my life, but Bella, there's a video on our YouTube, she bakes the most amazing cakes and she doesn't even need to weigh things out like on scales and stuff. She's like that good. You know, I have Lana who doesn't really talk, she's very, very shy, but she's like OCD cleaning, like she needs everything to be like pristine. And if she's fronting, then she absolutely needs the house to be clean, and if it's not, she will stay up till like 3-4 a.m. cleaning it until it's done. So yeah, it can be very, very different. And also, some of my girls are really, 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 really good singers, but I'm not. Like, I can hold a tune.
You are though.
But it's,
Yes,
you know,
are.
if you listen to whoever's fronting at the time, like I listen back to like my voice notes of when we've recorded ourselves singing, and you know, some days I really struggle because I'm coexisting with someone that can't necessarily sing, or I'm singing like incredibly because I'm coexisting with one that is amazing at singing. And when you listen to the voice notes, you sound different in everything. It's not like an artist who has an amazing vocal range. It sounds like different people singing. Like you won't be able to tell they're the same person. So it's very, very fascinating in the sense of, you know, each one is very, very different. It is completely different people. That everything about them is different. To something as simple as like things they like, things that the way they say certain things. I mentioned earlier how Sierra has different tea to Avery, and you know, so like Hannah hates all hot drinks. And then some only like coffee and things like that. Like everything changes, so whoever's like presenting, it will be different. And there's been so many times where I've like been taking a nap and one of the girls will make a hot drink and they've put like 3 sugars in, or they've put no sugar in at all, and I go to drink it and then I'm like spitting it out because it's disgusting to me, but that's how they like it. And it gets very weird because sometimes I have to have things in the house that I don't like, but they do. So if in case they come out in front for like the whole day, they need to eat, but they're only going to want to eat things they like. So, you know, I have to have things in the house that they like as well. And like orange juice and stuff, like the squash, I don't like that personally. I like the blackcurrant squash. But I keep it because I know some of my girls like it. So it's very like, it is completely different people. How different you and me may be, or anyone in this chat, how different you all are from each other compared to us. It is trying to find that like common ground of like, okay, we need to make sure we have enough for everything, everything like, for everyone.
I had to buy like a book so that, because one of my alters is non-verbal, so we've been trying to learn sign language for her, because again, like, that's something completely new and different for us, so we're trying to accommodate, like, you know, we get a bell so that she can hit that so that people know if she needs them. Like, you try and get little things to help your alters feel as comfortable as possible. So, for example, Felix is a guy, we've got a binder for him to wear when he's around to feel more comfortable and the most at home and things like that, because he would not want to function without it because he feels so, I guess, dysphoric about it. But yeah, they're very different.
Yeah, it's very difficult, but very different. I think we covered a lot of ground in this first episode of like GID and me. But I think that I don't want to overwhelm you guys with too much information at once because it is very, very complex. But if you guys aren't part of my Discord already, get yourself in there. There is a section on Q&As, and I will be answering all the questions in there. And I think I'm probably going to do this like as a little segment on my streaming channel on my Twitch regularly, because I think, you know, DissociaSteph is all about DID, and like raising the positive awareness of you know, what it is. It's nothing like Split. So we really want to educate people in like a really fun way, and answering your guys' questions is like the best way to do that, rather than you just sitting here listening to me just like tell you the story of DID, you know. Listening to your guys' like questions and your experiences and whatever is really fun. But I think that this is good, and this is a good way to try and get like positive awareness out there and see that people are quite like, I mean, normal. Who's normal, hey? But like, there's people like me and you who, you know, you wouldn't even be able to guess.
Again, can Ren do some of the questions?
Of course.
They're like here and they're like, I want out.
Yeah, of course. It might even be that in the next one that maybe one of my girls or one or more of my girls feel confident enough to come out and answer the questions like themselves, rather than me being like, oh, this is my experience with it. It might be that they get to come out and like talk on behalf of themselves.
And maybe you could have questions directly for alters as well, if any of you have things that you want to ask specifically the alters rather than the hosts. And that's another key word, hosts being like the main person that fronts all the time. Yeah, that might be a good idea.
I think that this is a good way, and it will be nice if some of our alters can come out and answer some of the questions and get involved as well. I think that'll be really fun for them. Because like we said, isn't it, like, alters just want to be acknowledged and made a bit of a fuss about. So it would be cool for them to like come out and actually spend time with everyone, and it would be really exciting. But yeah, it's going to be good. So thank you guys all for coming. We've really enjoyed it. Thank you all for all your questions and your love and support as usual. We will speak to you all soon.
Bye.